Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us for another book discussion with Sheela and Fatema from the Unerased Book Club. And tonight we are discussing Trick Mirror by Jia Tolentino. This is a Black book with pink and red writing on the cover, upside down, reverse on the bottom. And let's just briefly go around and introduce ourselves before we get started. My name is Lucy, and I am a library tech. I work in the youth department, and I also do some other events. I am a middle-aged white woman with shoulder-length brown hair. I'm wearing glasses and a blue shirt and sitting in front of some books and some watercolor paintings.
I'm Alex. I'm also a library tech in the youth department, and I'm here on a brown couch wearing gray.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth. I am a librarian at the library. I am in the youth department, but also select the adult fiction and book on CD collections. I am a white woman sitting in my living room with some photos on the wall, paintings on the wall behind me, and there's some light coming in from the window that I like.
I am also Elizabeth. Elizabeth Smith is my name, just to distinguish us. I'm a library technician as well. I work in the archives department, digitizing materials that people ask about, local history stuff. And I also do some programming, customer service stuff. And I am a middle-aged-ish white woman sitting in front of a white wall with a little greenhouse peeking out from behind me.
Hi, my name is Jacob. I am an AADL employee. I work in the outreach department. I am a 28-year-old white male, got my hair pulled back. I got a beard. I'm wearing a blue shirt, and I'm sitting in front of my kitchen. My head is perfectly blocking my dirty kitchen. So that's what I'm doing.
Hi, folks. My name is Fatema Haque. I'm a co-facilitator of the Unerased Book Club. I am a Bangladeshi or South Asian woman, and I am in front of a digital background of pink clouds and blue skies and lots of tiny birds flying. So glad to be here with you today.
And hey everyone, my name is Sheela. I am a early middle-aged, I don't know, I'm 31. Indian American woman with glasses, and I'm sitting in front of a virtual background of Adam's Peak, a mountainous area in Sri Lanka. And I'm the founder and co-facilitator of Unerased Book Club, a book club where we read exclusively Asian American and Pacific Islander authors, but delve into a whole breadth of literary genres. And I'm so excited that we're reading Trick Mirror by Jia Tolentino today. It is a set of 9 essays that connect both pop culture and cultural analysis with a deeper delve into what is probably the American psyche. So I'll open it up like I always do. Like, how did y'all feel about this book?
I can start. This is Elizabeth Smith speaking. I also read the Jenny Odell book, How to Do Nothing, which I saw was in the discussion questions, maybe getting ahead here, but I noticed a lot of similarities between the two, and like both were things that I had wanted to read for a really long time. So I was excited to read this and I enjoyed it.
I can share. This is the other Elizabeth W. And I loved it. I had actually, I don't know what happened. I started this book when it came out, and I think I was just in a weird place in my life because I like didn't finish it. I got through maybe the first essay, and then I just wasn't, I was like, this is like, I'm having to think too hard about this. I think I just was like not in that space. So I was excited, but a little nervous to try it again, but I flew through it. I loved it. I actually read some parts twice. I thought it was extremely thought-provoking, and maybe I was just in a better place to read a book that made me think than I was 3 years ago for whatever reason. But really enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to hearing what everyone else thought and delving into some of the essays.
Oh, this is Lucy, and I will say that I also enjoyed these essays, and like you, Elizabeth Smith, it did remind me of Jenny Odell's book. The other book that it occasionally brought to mind for me was the Awkward Black Girl book by Issa Rae, just because there's these two women sort of growing up in the age of the internet and how that formed their lives from a very early point. So it's interesting to make those comparisons. And then I think the books really diverge, but there was a lot in here. And as Fatema was saying before we started recording, it was hard not to just underline the whole book and be like, I want to, write that down. So there's a lot in here.
Yeah, I actually, sorry, go ahead, Fatima.
Oh, no, it's okay.
I listened to this book on audiobook last summer, and it's read by Jia. And that was such an incredible experience. I was expecting this book to be maybe a little more somber and not as engaging when I first tried it out. And I was so happy when the first essay like just dives in, like holds no bar, and it's a really beautiful mix of personal anecdote, cultural analysis, but then like a deeper understanding of what underpins pop culture. And it doesn't feel vacuous, like I think a lot of pop culture analysis can be. And I was listening to, because in all honesty, I didn't reread it before today because I've been sitting with the content for so long, but I listened to like a Stanford undergrad's book club on YouTube where she talks about each of the essays. And even though she's only like 10 years younger than me, it was so eye-opening to understand what she took away with it, reflect on what I took away with it, and then thinking about, to Lucy's point, what does it mean for young girls to be raised in internet culture, not at the precipice, but in it. And I look forward to potentially finding books that help taught or like help create like frameworks or think about what does it mean for young girls to be online or not online, and how do you navigate that?
Yeah, I think that a lot of what you were saying, Sheila, about the circuitous nature of the essays really resonates with me. I think in an interview with Tolentino, she mentioned that she really wanted to write a book that was worthy of being read as a book, not like short articles that it wouldn't feel as comfortable reading on screen. You would need to like sit down and get lost in it for a while. And I really feel like the book captured that sense of pacing and like depth and worldview as well as breadth. Like I was really impressed with the way she was able to blur so many genres together, from news reporting to personal essays to really funny, dark humor. I was like, yes, like I'm just giggling away as I was reading sometimes horrific things. And also agree that it raised a lot of questions in my mind and also made me think a lot about Jenny Odell's book. And Odell is quoted in here too, which I think is fascinating, how they're peers and engaging with each other in this. So I'm excited to dive in a little deeper with you all on those pieces.
We kind of brought it up a little bit, but for those who are not familiar with the way that we do the book club, Fatema and I published some guiding questions to help prompt conversation, but one of them was about How to Do Nothing by Jenny Odell, which we read last December. And I was wondering how people thought about the similarities or differences in the arguments around internet culture if you read both.
I think one place where they're a little different is that I feel like Jenny Odell is asking you to completely, or suggesting, or she is changing her interactions completely. That means like disengaging with the internet and finding some other way to be productive, not necessarily to create a product, but to just participate with things that are already produced and out there. I feel like Jia Tolentino is not necessarily suggesting how to disengage with the internet, but how to better engage with the internet, or even, I'm not sure she even does that. She's just talking about how people engage with the internet in a really, really interesting and deep way. So I kept thinking of Odell, but I could also see where they were not the same.
I was noticing that like Tolentino's book is more like the state of things. How did we get here? You know, what's actually happening? And Odell's book is almost like, how do we navigate it? Because Tolentino's book doesn't really offer any answers. And I think there's this like comfortable, ambiguous space of, this is where we are, and this is what reality looks like, and this is how it affects us. But she's not going out of her way to be like, and here's what we should do about it. Whereas I think Odell had a very, you know, specific prescription for how to navigate the consequences of living in such a globally connected social world, capitalist world.
Yeah, I felt like Jia Tolentino left it a little more up to the reader. She was kind of presenting the information and offering things to consider, rather than, I don't even think there's any point in the book where she suggests like a tool or a suggestion at all. That's not really what it is about. So to be honest, I did read How to Do Nothing, but I feel like I recognize, you know, I took note of the quote from Jenny Odell, but I don't know. It struck me as very different reading because of How to Do Nothing was so much more directions, I felt like, and suggestions.
So
I just think it's like, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Please. No,
okay.
Go ahead.
I was actually going to ask what essays people really kind of like found themselves drawn toward the most. And since there is so much content to cover in this particular book.
Yeah, I have to say, I really enjoyed each of the essays, which is a really amazing thing to say. I think my favorite one to read was the one about her experience on a reality show as a teen. But I think the one that I most learned something from, or the one that made me consider things in a different way, maybe the one that I got the most out of, per se, it was the one about internet culture. Particularly the idea that the internet warps the way that we see ourselves, and also tells us that our opinions matter more than they really do. I was like, whoa. That essay kind of handed me my butt a little bit, and I was like, okay. It's something that has sat with me, and that I've tried to talk with everyone I run into. I'm like, have you read this? Do you think your opinion matters too much on the internet? So to answer your question, I think that's the one I got the most out of.
How did people respond to that out of curiosity?
People are mad. No, like nobody wants to hear that, particularly, that your opinion might not actually matter as much as you think it does. That's a pretty big hill to swallow, especially as we're wading through, you know, the mud that is American individualism. You know, we think that our individual personality, opinions, thoughts, experiences are incredibly valuable. And I would just say that they're valuable, maybe not incredibly so. And I think that maybe Jia Tolentino would agree a little bit, or maybe I stole an idea from her a little bit, a lot of it.
I have to say, Oh, sorry, go ahead.
You can go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, having grown up before the internet, and not having that be part of my childhood, and like growing up and seeing the internet being introduced and how it was in the beginning, I read that and I was like, yes, thank you. I mean, I hate, because it's just like I come from a different place, really, where you don't just publicize all your stuff, and I have seen how these tools make it almost necessary to participate by sharing everything. And so it does change the scale of how you think about things. And so I enjoyed reading it from someone who was really in the middle of it, having been someone who came into it in a totally different way.
I was going to comment on the essay that I strangely related to the most. I sent Jacob a message about this because I was like, what do you think about this? Have you read this chapter yet? And it was about her experience in like conservative religious America. Strangely enough, the bodybuilders that bring telephone books and rip them in half came to my high school. So I had a weird moment there connecting with that. And I just thought like her tying religion to her later drug use was like an interesting thing to, like a brave thing to do. And that's something that is very common, I think, in rural America that doesn't get talked about a lot. And she does it in a way that's not like really going deep into that issue, but I thought it was just really interesting. And I really enjoyed that essay. And naturally, I liked the internet era essay, being a millennial myself.
I really liked the scam essay, because like it ties in all these different ways that we are given this false idea of agency and power with the internet, of like our voices matter, we matter, our ideas and opinions are valid or like need to be put on full display. But at the same time, there's people with immense power and wealth who can just like completely destroy your life within like a year, and you'll never see it coming because they're making decisions that aren't publicized. And there's that dichotomy that again, as a millennial, I feel like has just completely like taken the narrative of my life away from me. And also I just really enjoy talking about scams, because there are a lot of things that are scams that are just seen as commonplace or what we should be thinking as like status quo.
Did anyone else watch the Elizabeth Holmes show on Netflix? I was in the middle of watching that when I read this, and I was just like, oh, scammers. Because like that was really, I mean, huge, but also somewhat impressive. I don't know. Anyway,
I read Bad Blood. Yeah, I read Bad Blood, and I was like, this is enough airtime I'm giving to her.
Yeah.
It was interesting that she was commenting on all those scammers and was like, this hasn't been made into a television show yet. And here we are in 2022, and like all of the things she mentioned are now being run as television series. I was just like, oh, wow, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And also the way that I'm thinking about the Girlboss brand, and how that woman literally used television to promote her Girlboss brand, which is really just a fancy scam. What that particular essay made me reflect on is how the way that American capitalism exists today is that we sell people experiences and fun and togetherness. So all you ladies come on down to the Girlboss convention and get that good feminist feeling. I really wish I would have said that differently, but it made me think about Coachella, which is happening right now, and I see everybody in those outfits, which are, I think I'm finally getting old, so I'm like, I don't understand what
Festival
this
wear.
is. Festival wear, and it's really not a. Coachella is a scam insofar as it posits itself as a music festival, but it's really a place for people to go make content.
Mm-hmm.
And they're getting scammed by the ticket price, but there's many scams going on, if you will. But I guess I was just floored by the idea that the most prevalent scam really is selling experiences to people. And I see that so often.
Yeah, I was super interested in her, like, I'd never thought about all the adjectives that could go along with feminism. So she talks about like pop feminism and market-friendly feminism. And I think at one point it was, I think there was a couple other ones that she just brought it up, and Girlboss feminism was another one. And it's just thinking about how all the different takes on it and how it's all just like almost like a capitalist feminism. And I appreciated the commentary around that, around where when that shift happened. I mean, I was growing up when that shift happened from like, it's no longer appropriate for you to say like these blatantly sexist, misogynist things, you know, like a woman should be married or whatever, or like should be her goal, or she should have kids. I don't know, any number of these things, to these like falsely empowering individualistic ideologies that got touted, and then everybody kind of got on board with. But the more I look at it, the more I'm seeing like the lens of how do companies profit off of you for these beliefs, right? Even the body positivity, like, oh, you're body positive, now buy all these different things to look as cute as someone who's not this size, you know. It's just so that essay definitely made me think so much, and I was just like, so many different types of feminism, but ultimately they're all scams and not real feminism.
Oh, there's got to be a form of feminism that isn't a scam.
I agree.
Yeah, I mean, she's right though, and it's not something I'd ever really thought very critically about. But yeah, like in the self-optimizing, like the optimization essay, she's talking about mainstream capitalism or mainstream feminism, and how it's been sort of co-opted by just social forces. And that's absolutely true. And there's no easy way out of that, right? Because any system of thought is going to be shaped by the culture that it's in ways that are good, but often just really not, you know. And that's another area where she doesn't give you a path out, you know, like you guys had mentioned, but it's absolutely true.
Yeah, and everything has been co-opted. Like you know, when we saw all the companies sending out messages around Black Lives Matter, just you know, en masse, and then drop off, and there's nothing that happens or nothing that changes. So it's not just feminism that's been co-opted, for sure.
Also happens during Pride Month every year. Like every company suddenly is like selling rainbow merchandise, and then they're just like, all right, it's over. End the scene.
I feel like
I was happy.
Oh,
sorry, go ahead, Elizabeth. No, please.
No, I was just going to comment on something that Alex said. I think that was my favorite essay in the book, the always be optimizing.
Yeah.
Just because I think I really appreciated how Jia Tolentino didn't apologize for being a person of different, I don't want to say conflicted, I'm looking for the word, but like, you know, in that essay, she's talking about how she's going to bar classes, something I have done for years. And like, it is just as she describes. I love that because I could understand it so well, but she doesn't stop going, you know, like she's like, I know why I'm doing this and I'm still doing it. And like, this is a contradiction, like, but this is something we all deal with, you know? And I thought throughout the book, she's very good at balancing the contradictions, just like when she brings up the, you know, her experiences with drugs, you know, she doesn't necessarily apologize for that. Not that you should have to, but I think in the nature of an essay about religion, you might feel like you have to, and she doesn't. And I really liked that throughout the book. So I just wanted to make that comment, especially in that essay in particular.
Yeah, absolutely. I just wanted to go back to the, like, what does it mean for something to be co-opted? And this idea that I was having a conversation with a friend on Friday about what does it mean to have like a systemic change versus like the tip of the iceberg change, and the like the what is it, the flashpoint of the culture wars are really around that tip of the iceberg, as opposed to not just questioning but demanding a structural shift. So we can say, oh, like girl boss feminism, like women being entrepreneurs, like that's not solving the fundamental problem of women and non-binary folks are just so screwed by the system that like we don't have like built-in gender like whatever pay equity, or there's no parental leave for everybody that's at a federal level. We still like invest in private prisons and publicly funded prisons that disproportionately harm black folks, or we still don't have comprehensive immigration reform that actively helps everybody, et cetera, et cetera. And like we're getting stuck on really trivial but manufactured intentionally culture wars that don't address any of the things that we need. And I feel like between this conversation, the essay, and that one conversation with my friend, I just feeling very frustrated by how easy it is to scam and trick people into focusing on one little bit, as opposed to the much larger picture.
And the fact that brand of scamming is inherently American.
Oh, yes.
Like it is at the core of America. Like the American dream really is to be the ultimate scammer. Fatima, I think I interrupted you.
No, it's cool. Alex, did you want to add anything?
Oh, I just full support for what he had just said. Yeah, selling snake oil is a storied American tradition. That is what this country was built on.
I actually like I saw the pulled out, or I have underlined the quote that Sheela basically summarized, which is, at a time of unprecedented freedom and power for women, at a time when we were more poised than ever to understand our lives politically, we got instead of expanded reproductive protections and equal pay and federally mandated family leave and subsidized childcare and a higher minimum wage, the sort of self-congratulatory empowerment feminism that corporations can get behind, the kind that comes with merchandise. And if that is not the reality, and yeah, you know, I think the essays in this book really made me think about how my relationship to the internet has been changing, or social media particularly has been changing the last few years. As I was highly involved in online spaces and online communities, and they were so meaningful to me growing up. You know, I was in LiveJournal communities, and I credit a lot of the way that I think, my ability to write and think critically to those communities, because they fostered that kind of engagement and mentorship, and they were really close personal relationships. But when we moved into social media and Facebook and other things, I think that kind of disappeared, and it became this like presentation sort where, so I think earlier, Lucy, you were mentioning like you didn't grow up like sharing everything on the internet. And in a way I did, because I was blogging about everything and without shame, and God forbid somebody finds my old pages on Wayback Machine or something. But you know, it's like, it's out there, and I did it really freely and in community. But that same sort of relationship doesn't exist today. And for a while, I tried to engage in that. I was like, I want to talk about certain things, that I want to be able to engage people in these conversations. But I very quickly realized that these conversations aren't actually happening, because people are more, the attention to hold people's attention is so short as it is. I think it's one of the reasons why I really love spaces like this, where I can have deeper conversations with folks and build community in that way, even for a short period of time. And I keep thinking about, and this book is making me really think about, like, how do we do more of that? You know, not the let's go shopping around the store for for an hour before we come and talk for 40 minutes, and while we're getting facials and being sold other products, you know, like not that experience, but this.
Well, I think also like the social media component has made it like everything is so curated. You know, you are constantly having to curate what you put on there and selecting parts of your life. And like you're saying, Fatima, when you started out, you were just very open and it helped you to be open and be yourself. And now what's presented is just what people are picking that they think is going to be the most optimized image of themselves. And that is harmful to the person who's doing it because it's, you know, it's just, it's always this race to try and get there, but also it's harmful to the people who view it too, because you're seeing something that's not really real or not fully representative.
Yeah, and even you're right. And even when it's text-based, like you could write something long form in Facebook, but it's just not built for that. It's built for very shallow engagement. I know because I tried, and I know smart people, and I still couldn't trigger any actual, you know, it's just, that's just not what that tool is built for. And that is something that we've lost along the way.
And I was surprised and not surprised to learn that what Facebook was created for was basically just a way to compare yourself to other people, or a way to compare people to other people.
Or
and
people
I think
to
about
animals.
Yes.
Sorry.
No, don't be. Sorry, this making me giggle a little bit. And how my mind has really, the shape of my mind has changed because I have spent so many years comparing myself to other people and comparing other people to other people online without really even knowing that that's what I was doing. It became second nature in a way where second nature doesn't even begin to describe how automatic it is. And that's freaky.
Yeah, it's interesting. It takes like the commodification of the self to a whole new level. And it was interesting how she mentioned hot or not, because like I totally saw, like was on that site when I was like 12, which is so wildly inappropriate, but that's what happened. And it reminds me of like dating apps now where you just swipe through people like they're something for sale that you don't want. It's just like absolutely absurd, but that's the reality of our existence right now.
Yeah, I remember reading or listening to this last summer, and it was my first big wake-up call into how I do or don't present myself online. And to Jacob's initial point of like, my opinion really doesn't matter. It really doesn't in the grand scheme of things. And that's okay. And I'm very like lucky that my husband is very not online. Like his profile picture for like 10 years was like from when he was obviously much younger, and he had no inclination to update it because he did not care about what other people thought about him online. He's like, people want to call me, they can call me. And that type of ethos, it was just like that coupled with Trick Mirror, it's really like reminded me that I don't need to be online. I don't need to be hyper visible. It's just more clutter that goes into the airwaves. And like now this whole conversation about what is Twitter worth, like Elon Musk wants to be a stakeholder. I'm like, there's like a much more insipid like reason he wants to own it. He wants to censor free speech. But beyond that, like I haven't tweeted in months because literally nothing I say is going to change a conversation. And it's just gratification for like, oh, I was witty. I can be witty at home, or I can be witty with my friends. I don't need the internet's validation for that.
You might not even get that validation. Like whether you get likes or not is entirely dependent on the algorithm and whether you're even seen, or just so many different pieces of it. I think one of the self-delusions that like as I was reading this book, I was thinking about it. One of the self-delusions is that I have to have an opinion on all these things, especially when I engage on like, I see people's stories, whether it's the war in Ukraine or the US's like, response to Ukraine versus response to Palestine, to, any number of other places and the discrepancies therein, or any number of political things that are happening right now. And I feel like, oh, I actually do have feelings about these things, and I also have thoughts on these things. But if I stay silent, then I somehow feel like really weirdly guilty and complicit, like, oh, I should probably be reposting this. But then I don't know what it does to do that. So I've been teetering on that, where it's like negotiating the delusion that I have to say something or I have to have an opinion, to the fact that that opinion doesn't mean anything.
I think that kind of like relates back to the essay where she's talking about, I don't remember the word she used, righteousness, I think, and like how that frames American culture and how we respond to things. And she used an example of someone responding to the child that got eaten by an alligator at Disney, and like the response that another influencer made, and how that was like an example of American righteousness. And like, I don't remember exactly what the person said, but it was just a completely ridiculous example, but illustrates this like extreme righteous belief that we have, is like everything we do has to be justifiable in some way. And like, I don't know, she talks about morals, which I don't think she really expands upon, but I thought it was interesting, and definitely made me think a lot using that example. It's just like, yeah, you're right, that is actually something that happens a lot. I don't know why.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Go ahead, Alex.
So this is not a fully formed thought. This is just something that I've been thinking about since we started talking. But like, yeah, like how much our opinions matter? Probably not very much. But we're talking about a book that is a long piece of perspective. And what I had always just sort of thought of perspective and opinion as synonyms, and maybe they're not. Maybe like the short form, this is just my opinion without a whole lot of support or explanation or all that much point of view. Like that's just sort of, it's just short and shallow, and there's not a whole lot to engage with. It's just anger and chatter. And then something like Jia Tolentino's work is, I mean, it's from a very, very particular point of view, you know. She has her cultural background as in a wealthy suburbanite in Texas, and also a racial minority, and those things contrast in interesting ways. And she's able to flesh that out into something that talks about our broader culture, even though it's also very much talking about her own experience, and that's actually quite meaningful, you know. And like, yeah, and I have nowhere further to go with that. So.
You know, it's a paradox. It's like, your opinion doesn't mean much, but here's my book of opinions that are actually meaningful, so meaningful that we're sitting here talking about them today. I think that a lot of things about culture as it exists today is paradoxical. It doesn't make sense. Nothing makes sense.
I think Elizabeth mentioned that too, like the contradiction of her going to bar class and knowing she's doing it and all this stuff. And that's like, to me, that was kind of the theme underlying, is like the trick mirror is something you tell yourself that you know is a lie. Like right off the bat, you know it's a trick mirror, you know it's going to tell you a lie, but you don't really care. I mean, you do care. You're going to write a book about it, but it's like we're all living with these impossible set of conditions with late stage capitalism, and we're just trying to navigate it however we can.
Yeah, in that particular portion, she sees past the trick mirror, and almost on the same page, she's talking about, yeah, it's not reality, but this is where all the incentives are. And what else are you going to do, you know? And yeah, that's which bouncing off of you there, but that was a really powerful point to me.
Yeah. That actually connected to The Good Place for me, if anyone has seen that show. And this idea that, you know, it is becoming increasingly difficult to be a good person when even a single action has numerous unintended consequences. You know, I buy a tomato and I think it's like, you know, grown organically and so better for the environment, but then it's using like unfair labor practices or whatever else, or it's a monocrop and it's destroyed entire, ecosystems and whatever else might be. So then I lose all these points if there is such a point system to be one, and that just makes life so much more difficult to live. And I feel like this collection of essays really shows how complicated and complex life is now, where it is really hard to make decisions. And I think in my relationship to like, how do I navigate the social media space, and my relationship to the internet, especially post-Trump or like during Trump, was to actually some of those questions of like, if I disengage entirely, then am I just totally checked out and participating in the whole, like, I'm just gonna make a living for myself and do my own thing and live my best life and ignore everything else? Or am I going to engage in some meaningful way on the ground and in some way, which is really hard to do and requires so much effort? Or am I going to come back into this social media space and kind of engage and stay aware, or but not really have it end up in any sort of, or like not really make a difference, I guess. So it's really hard.
Yeah, I mean, I think that her point in almost every essay was like, this is deeply complicated, right? I mean, that comes up so often in so many different things. Like and I think I completely agree with you, Fatema, that like it has gotten more complicated as we know more and we have access to more, which in some ways is good, but also creates these impossible to navigate decisions and situations for all of us. And I think also the internet, as you mentioned, has just added stress to daily life in general that, just didn't exist before the internet. I mean, I think it's great that we know about the tomatoes and we know what is bad and good to buy and all that, but also that I'm at the grocery store comparing like these tomatoes are $2.99 more than these tomatoes. And it's like, sometimes I wish I just didn't know, and I just think that she does touch on that a lot. It's just complicated,
Well, I think that with the internet, and how do I say this? Our brains aren't meant to know all the stuff that we know because of the internet. My brain isn't designed or my brain isn't good at knowing that Alex had a burger for lunch, Elizabeth just went to Cedar Point, and Lucy just did the hokey pokey. And also that this tomato was grown in Timbuktu. Like, I'm not supposed to know all that. My brain can't know all that. And yet it does. And I think it causes a sense of stress. It causes a sense of anxiety. And I think that this book is drenched in a sense of anxiety.
It's also hard to know what's real. That's all the stuff that you're balancing in your brain, and I even think about it like, before the internet, when you were growing up and you wanted to know something, you had to like find a way to learn that thing. You either had to ask an adult or you had to find some book. But with the internet, like, you don't have to do that. And so, but how do you even know what you're learning or finding is real? And like, as a parent, that's kind of scary because you're like, what does my kid think this even is? It's too much information for our brains, and it's difficult to parse out what's the truth.
Yeah,
Something.
comment.
No, go ahead, Liz.
I was just gonna say Lucy's comment and Elizabeth's comment just made me think about, like, yeah, we have access to information, but we don't really have tools to decide or like vet that information. Most of us don't anyways. Obviously we all work at a library and there's that, but the average person might not have the first clue how to use a computer or use the internet or like discern what information on the internet is actually going to help them. They might be looking at some advertisement from Monsanto that is telling them to eat a tomato they don't want to eat.
Yeah. So two things to your point, Elizabeth S., I learned, was it like in my media studies class in 3rd grade at a public school, learned how to fact check information and learn how to understand what sources were valid, because that's like at the cusp of the internet becoming more mainstream. And I really feel bad for kids who don't have that very basic information in their curriculum, for like reasons of divestment, et cetera. And like media studies not being seen as a very important, very valid part of a curriculum or education. But as folks were talking, I like had this flashback to like towards the end of my time in grad school, where GroupMe is very popular. There's like a million different GroupMes, or people follow each other on Instagram. And I got this reputation as being like a really intense, like political person. And all I had to say was, y'all are seeing one version of me and you don't even know if it's real. And I said that to somebody very like directly, like, you have no idea if what I'm posting is really how I feel. You're making, like, you made it seem like that's the end all be all of who I am, or that's like how you're interpreting every other interaction that we have. I am both much more and maybe not even what you see on our curated virtual spaces.
I was reading an interview that Jia did. I don't remember what it was, where it was published, but she said, like, she's been told that her writing is super honest and like now everyone knows everything about you. And she was like, that's not true. Just because I told you 3 stories in detail doesn't mean you know my whole life. Like, you know a very detailed version of 3 events that happened in my life. And I thought that was a really interesting point, because that is true. Like, you read these books and you're like, oh, this is so radically honest. I know her so well, but like, you really don't. You just know what she's chosen to tell you. And it's the same kind of curation that happens online.
I think also that even if you know how to do things like fact check, or even if you have the critical thinking skills to be able to be just to ask a question about something that gets posted, I think the pace of things makes it really difficult to do it at a consistent level. And that's what worries me more. And I see that in my own behavior on the internet. Is like, I'll read something and I won't think twice about it. I won't necessarily like reshare it or anything, but it just gets stockpiled in my brain and I don't return to it. I don't fact check it. I don't, like do anything with it, but it's still there somewhere. And my brain is probably using it to make some decisions somewhere down the line. And I'm just like completely unaware. So that's definitely one of the things that's really hard, that even when you do know, and when you have those tools, it's really hard to use it in this particular pace.
I felt that way so much during the last election, just trying to keep up with everything happening. And I felt totally overwhelmed. And I felt practically like I couldn't be an educated individual about it unless I like stopped doing so many other things in my life and like read the news for 4 hours from multiple different sources and sites and all that. And I was like, wow, this is extremely difficult for even a person of relative intelligence who knows how to use the internet quite well, like to be able to do, there's just so much information all the time.
So we're coming up about on the hour. So I wanted to ask our last discussion question, which is, while there's so much anxiety and like difficulties and complexities to all these essays, did any of them leave you feeling hopeful? And if so, how?
I have a strange answer to this question. So preface to this, the last essay is about her, Gia's opinions on marriage, right? So I follow her on social media and she got married. I wasn't hopeful because I feel so strongly about marriage one way or the other, but it made me just think, things change. They just do. And, that essay, she seemed so, she made her argument, and I thought it was great, and I, thought it was perfectly fair, and I don't think I would have expected her to get married, but she did, and I just thought, it's a cliche quote, but the one thing that's always constant is change. So I'm hopeful that if we continue to have conversations like this, and we continue to look at the internet critically and look at social media critically and things like that, and just proceed with caution, that maybe there is change in the future that is positive. So that was kind of I just thought it was interesting how that ended up happening.
That's interesting that you say that, Elizabeth, because I thought that essay I liked that essay a lot. When I was in my undergrad program, like my senior seminar class, one of the essays we read was about the American wedding. And it was 2012, I think, at that time. And I hadn't really ever thought about this. Like, I'm not the type of person that was like, I planned my whole wedding and this is my whole life goal, but I could have easily been that person in this culture. So reading that essay in undergrad, learning that the average American spends $30,000 on their wedding was completely mind-boggling to me, but like very eye-opening. And then hearing her perspective. I do like to hear that she got married, because it sounds like she really loved her partner and they had a really good relationship. So that's good. And I think that like everything, the institution of marriage has its issues, which she points out, but it also has its room for improvement, hopefully, and is also a practical thing in our culture for tax benefits.
I found it particularly hopeful from the ecstasy essay, how she reframes being in a state of ecstasy at its most basic form is being able to step outside of yourself. As somebody who is deeply therapized, I feel like I have developed an ability to step outside myself and consider who I am as a person, and consider my relationships with other people, and step outside myself and see, in order to look at politics differently. And I go, hey, I can do that thing. And that thing is actually really worthwhile. It can bring joy, and I can learn so much from being able to do this thing. And I was like, wow, that makes me feel hopeful.
Now that you bring it up, Elizabeth, about the wedding or the marriage essay, this is gonna tangent and then I'll come back, but a lot of weddings in my community have gotten grander and grander and grander, and there's this immense pressure to have incredibly detailed and designer and brand named weddings, and that's how like Indian Hindu American weddings become so expensive. And there is a portion of it that is there's a price floor, because weddings are multiple days for cultural and religious reasons, that hotels know you can't go anywhere else. You're gonna do it here. We're gonna like gouge you there. But with the past 2 years of people not being able to get married in the way that they were expecting to get married, and this definitely applies to me and my husband as well, like there's a complete shift in how we think about what is a marriage for, what is a wedding, and what's like the purpose of getting together. And I'm starting to see more and more of weddings, maybe not, it hasn't trickled to the US yet, but it's definitely in Dubai and in the UK, in those diasporas where our communities are rethinking how they do weddings. And there's a shift away from social media being the reason you have the wedding that you have. And that is very hopeful. And I know it's very niche, but hopefully it's like a commentary on how other people in other communities think about gatherings and think about life goalposts.
I guess I'm kind of coming at this sideways, but like I didn't see a whole lot of hope or despair in what she was saying. That just doesn't. But she's this incredibly clear-eyed person who can be completely embedded in her culture and in her experience and in her life, but also self-reflective. She sees what's happening around her, and she sees what she's doing, and she sees how all of these complicated things bounce off of each other. And the more that people do that kind of work, and the more people talk about it, I mean, I think that's where hope lies, right? Because that's when actual fundamental change could actually happen.
I would have to agree with that. I think that's where my hope also came from in this story. And I don't want any of the listeners to think that this is a despairing book, even though it deals with difficult topics. It's quite humorous and really enjoyable to read through. And it's chewy in a really nice way. I appreciate it, and I feel like I will revisit some of the essays for sure. So for me, it was definitely this thing that I would much rather be able to see the matrix than than not, just to be an operator within it. So I'm glad that I know that I am being scammed in a million ways. I want to know so that I can at least make the decision to be like, yeah, this is a scam, but I'm buying into it. So there's something about that informed choice that feels decent for right now, and hopefully that I can make a different choice next time if I want to. Yeah. Is there anything else that folks were thinking about that they weren't able to share but really wanted to on this book?
Well, I would just say, like, aside from really enjoying this book, I mean, I realized I've read some of Jia Tolentino's things over the years of, like, she writes for the New Yorker and she's written for other things, but now it's like I just want to seek her out. There's something about the way that she presents information that, like you were saying, Alex, is so clear-eyed, but she's just like, she's an incredible writer. And this is someone who went to college when she was 16. She's just so good at sharing how she's thinking that I'm so glad I read this, but I really want to just start finding other things that she's written as well.
I have to agree with you, Lucy. I felt the same way after I finished this. I was Googling for other pieces of hers to read, for sure.
Love it.
I also saw her out on Instagram and followed her because I wasn't following her yet.
That is a very funny and ironic response to the book.
Like, I'm going to go on social media and follow you. So I learned something, didn't I?
I did the same thing. So totally. Yeah.
Looking into that trick mirror.
But we know what we did, right? I mean, we didn't just blindly do it.
Well, this seems like a really solid ending to our conversation. Thank you all so much for participating. I want the listeners to know that Unerased Book Club is for everyone. We welcome new participants. We have a couple of different meetings a month outside of this library discussion where anyone can join. Next month, we'll be reading And Nail the Evening Hangs On by Monica Sok. Yeah, we hope to see you there. Feel free to sign up for our emails online. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheela and Fatema, as always, for facilitating our discussion and putting this book in our hands. So thank you.
Thank you all.
Yeah. Bye.
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 Hi, thank you.